Okay, it's time now for one of our favorite parts of the month, and that is, of course, the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. Good friend Bob Seidenschwartz joining us this morning. Bob, how you doing, partner?
Well, good morning. You guys, always enjoyable coming in. So
well,
thank you.
You know, we do try to entertain a little bit.
Yes, you do.
Every
and you
now
do
and
it
then.
well.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, we have a special guest in studio.
We
right?
certainly do. So, Peter, if you would be do the introductions, please.
Absolutely. Korolo Aparicio is with us. He's the executive director of EcoViva. And Korolo has over 14 years working for social and environmental causes, principally in fund development. Before joining EcoViva, he led the donor services team at the Global Fund for Women and also led fundraising efforts for the Sierra Club San Francisco Bay Chapter, International Rivers Save the Bay, and Global Exchange. He has an MBA from San Francisco State University, where he also earned his BA. Korolo also holds an MA in anthropology from Vanderbilt, where he did field work in Guatemala and Mexico. He chairs the program committee of the Association of Fundraising Professionals Golden Gate Chapter and helps coordinate professional development programs for fundraising professionals. Okay, Korolo, good morning and welcome, sir.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really happy to be here in Missoula.
It is a pleasure. Now, where exactly did you come from before you actually got here to Missoula?
I flew in from Oakland, California.
And boy, are my arms tired. I'm sorry.
I knew this was coming.
Where's your drum trap?
Yeah,
take my wife. Boom, boom.
Need a rim shot machine here. So, sorry.
That I gave you an easy one.
Would you like me just to leave now, Bob?
No, Peter, please. By all means, stay.
All right.
Yeah. Well, I had the pleasure to have a conversation with Korolo a couple of weeks ago about what he does, the work, and where, and more importantly, we're constantly hearing about issues on the border, immigration, illegal immigration, the issues that are associated with it, but very few of us really know what's happening in some of these countries and some of the issues and real crisis that people face. And the work that you're doing is directly involved in trying to make a difference in these people's lives. But I think importantly for the audience to understand what are some of the challenges. So if you could give us a little bit of a background and recently some stories in the news and set the stage for us in terms of what's happening in some of these countries, because I think people are going to be rather surprised.
No, that's right. A lot of the stories that you hear about coming out of Central America have to do with crime is completely out of control. There's corruption. Guatemala's been in the news recently about essentially firing their former president and new elections. There's a lot of stories around push factors to migration, either to Mexico or here to the United States. And last year, one of the top stories was around unaccompanied minors migrating to the United States. So what my organization does is we certainly don't work on the enforcement side of this, but rather what we seek to do is work on what we refer to as the push factors to migration. So what we think is that families really would rather stay together and stay home, and people need certain basic things in order to stay home. They need a dignified livelihood, access to opportunities, education. A healthy environment is also one of these things that's very, very important, and that keeps people rooted in place. And these are the issues that we at EcoViva work on in partnership with organizations in Central America. Our principal partnership is actually in El Salvador, in this one region called Usulutan. And if you happen to be sitting next to a computer and don't know where it is, it's just Google it. But it's it's just like it sounds, and it's on the coast of El Salvador, and it's the home for one of the largest mangrove forests in Central America. So this is the geographical area where we work on various development projects that address some of these push factors.
Now, Korolo, I wanted to ask you a question.
Yeah.
As you look at Central America, what would you say is the most politically and economically stable of the countries in Central America?
Costa Rica by far.
Okay.
It has the luxury of having had peace during the 1980s, and as a lot of you well know, there were civil wars that just completely racked Central America back in the late 70s and 1980s. It wasn't until 1992 that El Salvador saw the signing of the peace accords, and it wasn't until after that oh my goodness, I'm trying to Wikipedia my brain here. I think it was 95 or 96 that Guatemala saw the end of its civil war. Nicaragua also went through a civil war, but Costa Rica was able to enjoy peace.
The reason I ask is because we hear so much about families, individuals, kids, coming all the way 1,000 miles up to the border of the United States. Are any of these folks emigrating to Costa Rica, or are they allowed to, or how does that work just within that Central American area?
Well, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of migration between Central American countries, and I think that the one exception is to Panama, and I'm not quite sure what the pull factor associated with Panama happens to be, but most of the push happens to be towards the north, towards the United States. Okay,
I was just curious because it just seems like the U.S. is such a magnet, for opportunity. They hear tales of the promised land and that sort of thing, and when something almost right next door is enjoying peace and a little bit of prosperity, it would make sense. Well, why travel 1,000 miles when I can travel 100 miles? And perhaps and find a little happiness closer to home.
Peter, I think there's several factors there. One, these are very small countries.
Sure.
So right. The ability to control your border is going to be, I think, substantially different than the expanse that constitutes Mexico and the United States.
Okay.
Number two, you've got to have jobs, opportunities, benefits. In terms of if you're going to a country like Costa Rica or some of the other countries, are they really in a position to take in and provide benefits to people that I think are associated with the United States? And in many cases, many of the families may already be here in the United States, and that's part of the magnet of bringing people from these countries up here also.
Okay, well, we're up against a commercial break. If you have a question for Korolo Aparicio, his executive director of EcoViva, give us a call. All three lines are open. You can also make a request or a question on our Facebook page, and we'll be right back with the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio in just a moment. Hey, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. Our special guest, the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio, Korolo Aparicio, executive director of a group called EcoViva. And so let's get right to the phone and say good morning to Tom. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm surprised that you don't know where the draw for people to get into Panama.
I've been thinking about that, and actually one of the draws in Panama has to do with the history and the history of the civil war in El Salvador. There were a great deal of people who fled the conflict of El Salvador and settled in Panama, and a lot of people stayed. So there's family ties also.
They stayed because they had jobs, and the jobs were in the record industry. They make Patsy Cline records. I love you guys.
You learn something every day. There's a Patsy Cline connection. Right on. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Oh, that's funny. Yes. I'm sorry.
What little we didn't know that we learned today.
Exactly. All right.
I wanted to step in and ask a question if I could. One of the things, I did a Google News search on El Salvador. And other than the story about a father that had a baby swap issue with another El Salvadorian family from Texas, almost every news story that came up in the top 50 was about gangs and death. And I wanted to hear what your thoughts and how, it seems like this has to be one of the biggest issues in El Salvador, how EcoViva deals with that or works around it. It sounds like it would be a difficult issue.
Yeah, crime really is a very serious issue in El Salvador. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It really is a problem. And it's one of the problems that the government is facing, and they're trying a whole diversity of tactics, everything from community policing to nowadays even more strong-arm tactics of using commandos on raids and that sort of thing, and really focusing on the enforcement side of it. In the communities where we work in the department of Usulutan, yeah, it's a problem. There are people who are participating in gangs. But as far as the safety of the organizations that we work with, the communities that we work with, they're poor. There's not a whole lot that can be extorted from them. So in many ways, they're safer from them. They're also a known factor within the community, and everybody knows that they're there working towards development goals. So they're seen as not posing any sort of threat to the gangs. So in terms of the type of work, the type of development work that we do, it's a challenge, but it's not an existential threat. But it really is a very, very serious issue in the country.
One of the things that it says on your website that you're attempting to tackle or deal with is the issue of social justice. And it seems to me that if you have a country ridden by crime and gangs, there's a lack of justice there, right? And I guess I was wondering, does EcoViva attempt to solve or help alleviate the problem with gangs and support for a local rule of law?
Well, some of the programmatic work that we work on is with youth, and what we try to do is we try to stem these push factors to join gangs. I mean, what are some of the motivations for joining gangs? It's because you don't have a job, you don't have opportunities for education, you don't have a way of engaging with the broader community. But what we've done through our youth program in association with the Mangrove Association in El Salvador is create youth leadership programs and these sort of career paths, if you will, towards leadership, towards civic engagement, towards education, towards economic opportunity, fostering youth entrepreneurship. So these are all our alternatives to participation in gangs. We're not a position to be law enforcement. I mean, that's the job of the Salvadoran government, and that's the job for them. But what we can address are the social issues that are the push factors towards joining gangs.
Now, I wanted to ask you if the gang problem, is it generational? In other words, have the gangs been in existence for so long that grandfather, father, son each goes into the gang? I mean, have they been around that long, or is it a relatively new phenomenon?
Well, what you saw was a great deal of gang activity starting pretty early on. I wouldn't say quite grandfather's generation, but certainly parents' generation.
Fathers and sons, right?
With people being deported from Los Angeles, so you see a lot of the gangs like the Mara Salvatrucha having its origins in L.A. gangs. Folks getting deported to El Salvador, having no connection at all to El Salvador. So what are they going to do? They're going to reconstitute the gang structure that had been created here in the United States, reconstitute it over there and create problems in that part of the world.
Well, that's got to be difficult to stop, doesn't it? Because they bring with them that machismo. Here's what we accomplished. We have an organization. We have a hierarchy. We can help give your life structure because I've lived it, and so I'll be your leader and show you how it's done. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the truth is, in the past, one of the programmatic activities that one of our partners did was work with gang members who wanted to leave the life, and they had a tattoo removal program.
Wow!
Because that's one of the gang identifiers. Nowadays, our focus is a little bit different. We're focusing more on the youth, and like I said, addressing these push factors that lead some young people to participating in gangs.
Korolo, we're going to have to go to our break here, but when we come back, I'd like to ask, because we're talking about the gangs in the present time, but I don't know if people really understand Central America historically has been run by very powerful families and as well as very strong military backing. So in effect, I could probably make a case that many of the military factors in effect acted like gangs in terms of control, influence, corruption, the vast wealth that was accumulated. So when we come back, let's go back and talk about that a little bit, because I want to really get into, is there institutional accountability in the governmental aspects of these Central American countries? Because it's got to start at some level if it's going to have credibility.
Okay, Korolo Aparicio, our guest from Montana World Affairs Council. We'll be right back. We have all three lines open. If you have a question or comment, we'll be right back. And we're back on Talkback, and every now and then we get to go beyond the borders of good old River City here and talk about the world. The Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. Bob Seidenschwartz joining us here in studio. Special guest in studio, Korolo Aparicio. He's executive director of EcoViva. So now, Bob, you just asked a question a minute ago before the break. So
yeah, as we're discussing the gangs as a present issue, there had to be an environment that was presented to make it possible for these type of entities, organizations to exist. And if you go back historically, Central America has always been a place where you've had very strong oligarchies. And who supports the oligarchies? Typically, you're going to have some type of military force that acts and works in conjunction with that. So can you give a little bit of a background to that from the standpoint of, is there institutional accountability within these governments, or is corruption, inefficiency, and such so rampant that it makes it very difficult to achieve some of the objectives that your organization is working on?
So the answer is yes. It does make it very difficult because you have to remember that a lot of these countries went through many, many years of not only having oligarchies firmly in place, militaries that were there to support them, and great wealth disparities, great wealth inequality. That said, I think El Salvador right now has a great opportunity because they've gone through a couple of democratically elected governments. And right now they do have a government that, interestingly enough, is the presidency is from the party that is the present incarnation of the former guerrilla party, the left-leaning guerrilla party. And the assembly, it's divided between the conservative arena, the left-leaning FMLN, and a whole constellation of other smaller parties. So they do have a very vibrant democratic institution. There's still issues within the judiciary that they're under-resourced, and that's a problem, and that's a problem that they're really trying to address. But one of the issues that you raised was the oligarchy and the problem with great wealth disparities. I think that a lot of what the Salvadoran government right now is trying to do is address some of these root causes. And I can cite one example that's very pertinent to the region where we work. They have a seed procurement program. So what the government does is they have a program where they buy corn seed from farmers, with the idea of redistributing the corn seed to farmers that don't have access to or can't grow their own, or find the inputs really, really very expensive. This is a program that's been working. It's been working for several years. It's helped pump $25 million into the rural economy, supplies jobs to thousands of people. It's become a way of lifting people out of poverty and providing food security for thousands more people. Well, unfortunately, there's this aid package that was destined to El Salvador to the tune of $277 million through the Millennium Challenge Corporation. And the grant was going to go through, and there was an interruption to that when U.S. Trade got involved, and they said, you know what, that program that you have is in violation of CAFTA.
Wow.
Central America Free Trade Agreement. So of course, we raised a fuss. We got together with farmers, created position papers, got in touch with the author of the bill that created the Millennium Challenge Corporation and this grant, and basically came down on the side of, it's not the place for U.S. Trade to dictate what the Millennium Challenge Corporation is going to do. They have their own charter, and U.S. Trade can't enforce this aid package. So anyway, there's this program that's working, that's lifting people out of poverty, but unfortunately, there was an attempted intervention to circumvent that.
What was behind that, though, from a legal standpoint, when you're describing this? Mm-hmm. What was that program that was working in violation of specifically that brought the U.S. trade issue into play?
They considered it to be a subsidy, an illegal subsidy, and the government would argue that it isn't, and that's still to be decided, through. But there's got to be
a tie-in with the El Salvadorian government in this trade organization in the U.S. to be considered what? What were they getting from the U.S. that then said you're in violation? So that there had to be a trigger somewhere.
It's corn, right? I mean, imagine if a Canadian company got a subsidy to give people lumber jobs to harvest more timber. Our timber people in Montana would be upset that they were getting this big subsidy for timber harvests, and then there would be a trade issue. And it's similar, except for in this case, people are starving to death.
No, I understand that. What I'm trying to draw out though is what was El Salvador receiving? Because you have to be getting something in a trade pact that you then would be in violation of. So if there was no trade pact, they could do basically whatever they would choose to.
No, it was just the act of having this corn seed subsidy and the possibility that U.S. companies were being blocked out of this.
That's the point. That's the point I'm getting to.
But they weren't. What wound up happening was there was a bidding process, and what the U.S. companies or U.S. trade wanted was more preferential treatment for U.S. companies.
Gotcha. Okay, that's what I wanted to find out.
A more level playing field for local farmers too.
And with that, we're going to take a little break. 721-1290 is our number. 1-800-568-5309. It's really useful to be able to look into other parts of the world because we get so comfortable in our little world here in Missoula, Montana. We forget what the rest of the world is going through just to survive day by day. So we're going to come right back with more of Talk Back. Love to have your calls. If you have a comment or a question, give us a call. 721-1290. Hey, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is the number. John King is over there. That's Bob Seiden-Schwartz. I'm Peter Christian. This is the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. Our guest in studio, Korolo Aparicio, Executive Director of EcoViva. And Chris is on the line. Chris, good morning. You're on with Korolo. Go ahead.
Hello. I actually am a member of the EcoViva community.
Wonderful. Well,
awesome.
welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
And I have in my lap some very lovely pictures, hard copies of the annual report of EcoViva. And I want to ask, the young people, they seem joyful. They seem that they are working in community. I mean, there are some very specific, wonderful projects they're working on. I'm wondering, how would you compare these young people with American teenagers and so forth in terms of, I don't know, their how they respect one another and so forth. So that's my comment and question.
Okay. Thank you so much for your call, Chris. Appreciate it. All right.
Chris, thank you so much for being part of the EcoViva community. We really appreciate you so much. So one of the key differences that I've seen is that kids over there have a lot less stuff. And one of the things that they really focus on is relating with each other and building community and doing things together. Kids play together. They don't interact with a lot of screens. There's not a whole lot of screen time there. So I'd have to say that, with some of the younger people, younger teens that I know, that's one of the differences. And one of the things that I've really greatly admired about some of the young people that we work with is their entrepreneurial spirit and real desire to get things done for their communities, and also to make their lives better by creating economic opportunities for themselves.
So along those lines, they don't have a lot of stuff. They don't have Wi-Fi where many of these villages are, correct?
Some do. They have these portable Wi-Fi that we use to keep in touch with them and work with them.
So in a term of cultural adaptation, when introduced to something that you did not have, and have you seen examples where they have then the opportunity to have access to that, the digital? Does that start to change the interactions? Does it change the culture in some way? Because we always seem to want what somebody else has, and when we don't have it, of course, we don't know what we're missing.
What I've seen a fair amount is that the young people are using a lot of this digital stuff to work with. They're using it for social media. They're using it to promote real-time activities and that sort of thing. I don't think that we've seen the radical change that we're seeing here in the States, where there's a lot more time devoted to interacting with screens rather than real live people.
Now you've got of course, El Salvador one country, okay, and there's Nicaragua, there's Costa Rica, as you said. There's so many countries that are, and of course, all of them are quite small, and each one stands alone in its own, I'm sure, its own history and its own traditions and that sort of thing. So when it comes to the interplay between these countries, what does EcoViva do to try to bring these peoples together, to try to perhaps if they could all join in maybe just in one project to try to make things better for that area of the world? I mean, is there anything you guys are doing about that?
Yeah, actually, we have been working on creating collaboratives between different campesino peasant organizations across borders. So there's right now in El Salvador, there's an attempt to build a new co-op that'll serve farmers with access to markets, with consulting, and with basically a way of making the rural economy less lumpy and less barriers to market. We've worked with people who've launched very successful ventures in Panama and brought them over as consultants for this group. We also work with organic farmers in Honduras, and there's been a great degree of cross-pollination of ideas and best practices between these organizations.
Do the people in those countries, do they trust each other? Do they get along? I mean, are there? I realize there were border conflicts, back in the 80s and that sort of thing. But have they learned to get along since then, or is there pretty good relations?
Government to government is one story. People to people is another. Especially when you find common cause, when you find that, look, we're all in this together. We're all farmers.
Corn is corn.
Corn is
on
corn.
One side of the border or the other, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and organic sugarcane is organic sugarcane. So people have found common cause across borders.
Is the organic movement, I noticed you mentioned that word 4 or 5 times, is that like a domestic desire or something that is imported from America that we want them to do?
At one point, what we called organic agriculture, it was just called agriculture. Of this new conventional agriculture with a lot of chemical-based inputs. That's actually a relatively, in terms of human history, it's a very new phenomenon. Whereas in Central America and the rest of Mesoamerica, which is the birthplace of corn and a whole lot of other fruits and vegetables that are part of our modern staple, those were raised organically, in dynamic sorts of environments with each other. And what folks are doing is they're finding that there's actually a more environmentally sound and economically wise way of raising food that produces greater outputs in many cases than with inorganic inputs, and actually winds up better for the bottom line for farmers. But it does require know-how, and it does require work, and it does require skills shares. And that's one of the opportunities that we have as EcoViva to be able to broker these educational exchanges between farmers.
So we have to take a break. When we come back, I want you to talk about, because you mentioned mangroves, orchards, or maybe not orchards, but mangroves. Forests, and some of the fisheries. So when we come back, could you talk a little bit about what you're doing to help with grow some of the economic opportunities, but make some of these also sustainable too?
Okay, we're going to come right back. 721-1290. We have all 3 lines open. It's the Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. Montana World Affairs Council on the radio. I'm Peter Christian. John King is over there. Bob Seidenschwartz joining us here in studio. Korolo Aparicio is with us, the executive director of EcoViva. So let's continue.
Yeah, I had asked mango forests, fisheries, habitat that's existed since time began. Tell us a story here about what it's like working in that region, the people's lifestyles, and some of the challenges and opportunities in those specific areas.
Yeah, so it's hot. It's hot. It's very hot in the mangrove forests, but it's one of the mangrove forests are some of the most biologically diverse ecosystems on the planet. They're also really important for the overall health of the planet. Mangrove forests actually sequester more carbon acre for acre than rainforest, tropical rainforest. In the place where we work in El Salvador, in the Bay of Jiquilisco, which is home to the largest mangrove forest in Central America, it's right on the Pacific Flyway. So so birds, migratory birds that go all up and down the Pacific, they stop there, get fatted up, and continue along their way. So El Salvador is really connected to the whole Pacific in terms of the web of life and these interrelations. As far as the people who live there, they were resettled there after the conflict. So after the conflict that ended with the Chapultepec Peace Accords back in 1992, their people were given grants to land. These are people who had been living in exile in Panama, forced into exile because they had sympathies with the rebels, or got caught in the crossfire and had to leave. So they were resettled. They were also resettled with people who had sided with the army. So
there's a good combination.
So there's a good combination.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that what happened was people had to find common cause. People had to find ways of making peace, and that's what some of the founders of my organization got involved in was helping facilitate this peace building process. And another thing that helped in this process was, ironically enough, Mother Nature. This place is very vulnerable to tropical storms, and during Hurricane Mitch and some other really powerful tropical storms, people realized that they had to band together and come up with ways of preparing for the next storm, building resilience within their communities, but also advocating for their rights, because upstream there's a dam, and the dam operators would unleash the floodgates, not tell anyone about this, and just created, on top of Mother Nature doing her thing, there was a man-made component to the natural disaster.
Would this be similar to what the Everglades are like in the United States in terms of it has a natural system of ebb and flow in terms of the tides and such, and of course it's the absorber when you do have these storms. So when you start to have these man-made kind of issues separate from the storms, you disrupt that system's equilibrium.
Absolutely, and that's one of the so-called nature services that the mangroves provides for people, and why it's absolutely important for the mangroves to stay alive. It's not only because of the wonderful biodiversity and the nature and all of that, but people actually benefit. What these mangroves do is they actually take away some of the punch from some of these tropical storms.
Like our barrier islands in the Gulf Coast and on the East Coast.
Exactly, and we've seen the exact opposite in places, like with Hurricane Sandy, and with Katrina, where you have these depleted ecosystems that would otherwise take away some of the storm's punch.
They're the shock absorbers.
Exactly. So you see an economic benefit right away in terms of mitigation against natural disasters by keeping these ecosystems healthy and vibrant for people.
Well, allow me, if you would, Korolo, to bring this home a little bit to Missoula, Montana, especially the University of Montana. Is there anything going on at the University of Montana specifically regarding El Salvador that is encouraging to you, that is supportive to your organization and what you're trying to accomplish?
At the University of Montana, well, I've been invited to speak at a class, and one of the things that we do have is very active participation from educational institutions that provide different sorts of services to the organizations that we serve in El Salvador. So, for instance, we have a really great relationship with the Middlebury Institute for International Studies, and they've helped one of our campesino co-ops develop a business plan for their operations, and this is an ongoing project.
Is that Middlebury, Vermont?
Yeah, Middlebury, but they also have a campus out in Monterey.
They do, okay.
Yeah. So we do have these institutional relationships with universities.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask your perspective on aid to the country. Obviously, aid comes in a bunch of different ways. There's private firms, there's foreign countries, there's the United States, there's other groups like yours, I'm sure, that work in the region. On the spectrum, how do they do? Of course, you work with EcoViva for a reason, so I'm sure you're putting yourself on the top of the pinnacle here as far as the efforts that you do. But, what are some of your criticisms and concerns when it comes to the aid that gets flown into these countries?
Well, first of all, I think that with any sort of aid, the local people need to be consulted, put in leadership roles, and and put in roles where there can be evaluation of its success. I think that's one of the strengths that we have with EcoViva. I mean, we're a small organization. We're not going to solve all the problems in Central America. No, but if we can move a grain of sand and work in collaboration with communities on the ground, we will have improved the lives of some people. Now, as far as these larger aid packages go, such as from USAID or from the Millennium Challenge Corporation, I think that it's very, very important to take local leadership into consideration, local governance, and to make sure that the aid is actually being used for what it was intended. So, for instance, there's a proposal now for the Northern Triangle for $1 billion in aid. This is something that was proposed by Joe Biden, and I think the details are still being worked out. I'm still a little sketchy on what the details are, but it seems as though most of the funds are being appropriated towards law enforcement and not really addressing some of the push factors that lead towards criminality. So this is a problem. I mean, and it's a problem of evaluation, and it's a problem of are we applying the right tool to the right job?
So it's almost as if they're saying, here's what we think you need. Here, take this.
Exactly.
And you say, here's what we really need. Can you help us with this? Right?
Exactly.
Okay. We're up against our final break. We'll be right back after this 1-minute timeout. All three lines open, 721-1290.
Who gets the credit?
Hey, we're back on Talkback. 721-1290 is our number. We're almost out of time, but I understand that we have Chris back on the line. Chris, welcome back. You're on with Korolo. Go ahead.
Hello. I'm looking at my report, my annual report for EcoViva. I see environmental sustainability as a key program, and it says local enforcement of environmental regulations. I wonder if you could talk about that. Also, if you could just talk about some of the kind of amazing things you're actually doing. And I'm wondering, would EcoViva, at least to some extent, be an example of what could be called free market environmentalism?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Very good questions. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chris. I'd never heard that term, free market environmentalism, but
I like that.
Full votes from both sides.
Yes.
But one of the things that we see as absolutely integral to the work that we do is focusing on both sides of that word eco, which is derived from the Greek word oikos for home. So both the administration of the household and also the care of that household. So looking at both the economic and the environmental side of this. So let me give you an example of one of the projects that we've done on sustainable fisheries. So in the region, one of the practices that they had was something called blast fishing. Have you guys ever heard of blast fishing?
Oh, we do it all the time out here. That's,
Crocodile Dundee, right?
Common on the Clark Fork.
Yeah, you could throw a piece of dynamite into the bay or into the river and kill absolutely everything in sight, and pose danger to the fishers. Also, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I've met fishermen who've lost fingers in that process. So one of the programmatic activities that we did was to work with people who were weaning themselves from this practice to try something different. So we tried enforcement of local regulations. This is completely illegal to do it.
It's kind of hard to disguise a big boom.
Exactly. Yeah.
Out in the middle of a lake somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an illegal practice. So we worked with communities to support rangers, wetland rangers, to enforce this set of regulations. And it's people who the wetland rangers were actually reformed former blast fishermen themselves. So they were known in the community. They had the experience. They had the credibility. But enforcement wasn't nearly enough. So, you can take care of the environmental aspect through enforcement, but you also need to take care of the economic aspect of it. So what we've been working on is developing access to markets for sustainably harvested fish. And one of the great results that we've had is that formerly there were a lot of sea turtle kills in the area as a result of blast fishing. And since we've started our work on this sort of thing, there haven't been any reported sea turtle fatalities because of blast fishing.
How do you know a fish was sustainably harvested? I mean, do you check for the hook hole in the mouth or what?
Well, a lot of this is self-policing, and these communities are small. People know the people who are actually doing the sustainable practices, and people know gossips networks of gossip are very powerful.
You're bringing up a very important point. We can have these intellectual discussions and such, but at some level, people have to make these changes very individually within their own community, and to be able to kind of self-police themselves separate from the regulatory side of the equation. So where does that change come from within a community that you've noticed with the work that you're doing?
Mm-hmm. I think that the change comes with that realization that you're depleting the commons, that you're actually harming your neighbor and you're harming yourself by doing an unsustainable practice. I think that part of it also has to do with credible enforcement that's community-based, enforcement where people can see the benefits of it, and also on the market side of it, where people can see benefits of being able to participate in more sustainable practices and be able to generate more profit from it.
Well, the whole idea of I think she had a great idea with free market environmentalism, and that is when you take care of where your livelihood comes from. No one's going to clear cut a mangrove forest. It would be stupid. You would all die. That would be the end of it. So you need to take care of it. You need to do everything you can to make sure it's going to stay productive. Mm-hmm. And so in a way you're thinking about market economics, and you're also thinking about environmentalism, because if I don't keep this healthy, my family will starve.
Absolutely. I think that those are both parts of that equation, that you have to take care of the environment, but we also have to be able to do it in a way that's sustainable economically, right, in a way that generates enough revenue and a dignified livelihood.
So is this a self-awareness that kind of intuitively the people understood, or did you have to bring in examples and provide some teaching to help bring these concepts into reality?
I think that a lot of these concepts actually were homegrown. People recognized them. People at the Mangrove Association, people at the this other organization called La Coordinadora, which is a coordinating body of the different communities in the region. They saw this as a problem. They saw this themselves, and what they needed, though, was they needed help in getting the word out to people who hadn't had this shift in conscience.
Now, Korolo, we're almost out of time, so I want to get some contact information. If folks want to get more information about EcoViva and how to become a part of like Chris, become a part of the organization, what do they do?
Yeah,
and there's a luncheon. Please mention the luncheon tomorrow. Chris, if you're listening, come to the lunch tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lunch tomorrow, the World Affairs Council lunch. It's going to be at noon at the First Interstate Bank Building in downtown Missoula. So everyone's welcome to come. Where can people find more information about that on the website?
Montana World Affairs Council website.
Yeah.
MontanaWorldAffairsCouncil.com.
And we are completely.
And for EcoViva, our email address or our URL is ecoviva.org. Ecoviva.org.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
John, what's coming up tomorrow, buddy?
We'll be speaking with the Wilderness Society. They're trying to make sections of Montana off limits to oil drilling.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody. We will talk to you tomorrow.